Welcome to the meta episode. I don't know what episode number. Let's call it the end of season 30 and beginning of season 31. Welcome to the show. This is your first time. Basically, what the show is looking at the competitive GAC meta, sort of what's happening now, what happened in the last season, what's about to happen in the next season, what's popular, not popular, growing and lowering in popularity and effectiveness. Who am I? I'm Kin. I'm a 10-ish, well, closer to 11-ish million now, actually. Player in Kyber 1, mostly in the top 50 sometimes, sometimes a bit higher. Well, top 50 is a broad range, but sometimes in the top 10. But really, since datacrons came in, I used to range from the top 20 to top 100, I guess. But ever since datacrons came in, I really appreciate those and the flexibility it gives to players to be creative with their offense. So I've done a little bit better and usually been in the top 50 since that. Anyway, not really important for the show. What's important is how much GAC fights I watch, how many GAC fights I watch. Most of this is just so I can so I can learn and improve my own gameplay, but also to populate the Grand Arena Science counter tool, which is now available on Discord too. There's a bot we just introduced it yesterday, I guess, when you watch this video, a little bit yesterday. Anyway, I watch enormous amounts of GAC fights, and watching all of that, even if I only select like 1% for the counter database, it still lets me see a lot of GAC combat and see what units are popular, what people are doing, what top players are doing less than top players are doing. Bigger rosters, smaller rosters. So that's where I base my opinion. As I'm chitter-chattering here and warning you ahead of time, oh, by the way, you notice I have a blue screen behind me now? Woo! Fancy. Anyway, this is the long episode show where I just talk. I have some interesting things to show as well, but I mostly talk. If you're actually watching this, we'll watch in the background for a decent portion of this Pepito, a quite good GAC player. Well, Jimito is his name. GAC. French YouTube channel, but you don't need French obviously to watch the videos, so that's going to be going on in the background while I talk. I'll pause it now and then to look at a couple of other things. So, where are we right now in the meta? WoW is the easiest way to describe it. I think I described it last time as well, that way. But this is sort of the last of the datacron overload. Not that datacrons aren't going to be around and play a big role, but it's the last of like the really crazy datacron times, because it's the only time, the last season rather, we'll have 3 sets active at the same time. So now they've introduced a new cadence where datacron set lasts for 4 months or 4 GAC seasons, and we have 2 conquests of farming them. So that started with set number 4. And so this last month was the only season that we'll have, or the last season that we'll have 3 of the preliminary set in effect. For this current season that we're about to start, we do also have 3 sets in effect, 2, 3, and 4, but not of the early exploration sets, which are a little bit more powerful, I think, especially the first 2. Although, depending on what you think of the deployable cooling systems, you may have a different opinion. But my opinion is that there's not quite as many stupidly overpowered mechanics in this 4th set or in the 3rd set, that instance. But anyway, how does that impact the meta? What does that actually mean for the meta? I evaluated it in 2 ways. One is the way that people engaged with GAC, with datacrons in play, Not necessarily engage with datacrons. I talked more about that last episode, but engage with GAC. Are they playing GAC more or less? Do they care more or less? Do they spend time, more or less time, etc., etc.? And then how it impacted playstyles, which is, I think, one of the biggest adjustments related to datacrons, and specifically how many are in play at the same time, how long they last, etc. Because if nothing else, what datacrons introduced is a much higher time commitment cap, I guess, or potential cap. Effectively, there is none with datacrons. Like, you could spend hours every single fight trying to figure out every single match, really, trying to figure out the perfect counterplay to what your opponent might do or might not do. But in the end, I mean, personally, I don't think really it's worthwhile, but there is no real cap. Like, with mods alone, you had a much more reasonable amount of time because there's only so many possibilities, but datacron just blew that up. So we'll talk about player engagement first, and I'm very clearly, I'm only analyzing or looking at or evaluating and offering opinions about the competitive players. And I don't just mean the top 1,000 of Kyber 1 or something, although many competitive players are there. But it's also players who are climbing up, could be 5 million, 6 million, 8 million, 4 million GP, who are just as competitive as the players in 10 million GP, but they have different opponents they have to fight, and their experience is different for sure. So I'm looking at all of these players when I talk here about competitiveness and player engagement. That's the first thing. So what has it actually done and what's it doing? So the CG side of things is very easy. CG wants more players to be involved, so they spend more money. Simple enough. Now, what is it actually doing? This we don't know. Only CG knows the engagement. And of course, their evaluation of engagement could be different than ours, engagement with GAC. Are they clicking on more buttons and spending more time on the screen? Maybe that's just more engagement for them. I'm sure they're not looking at just that. I'm sure looking at the amount of players who are spending more or less time, the skill rating and roster size of these players, probably even the amount the average player has spent based upon how much time they spend in game and how much they're spending now. There's so many variables available for them to evaluate. So we don't know the answer to that. But we can make some assumption, given how they're changing datacrons, that the numbers were not all positive. So they're reducing down to 2 sets instead of 3, which is effectively less money for them because there's fewer unique things to buy less frequently. And if they don't change the drop rate of Conquest has not changed, or the datacron materials of Conquest has not changed significantly from the past, let's call it the past 2 sets, because set 1 was very difficult to acquire. It's changed a bit. They're not having the bonus drops in like late side nodes like they did set 3, but it's still not that difficult to acquire, to farm materials in Conquest, especially if you're doing the 50 Conquest or 50 energy refreshes. So in general, engagement, I would say, has not been great, and they're trying to change that. We can look to see how they're changing that by the duration, acquisition stuff I just talked about, and also by how they intend the datacrons to be used. Like, do you put them on offense or defense effectively? So in set number 1, with the Jedi, well, with Rey in particular, but also Jedi Master Kenobi, it made Rey probably the most frustrating GL to face on defense, and it made Jedi Master Kenobi, at least until set 2 was released, it made Jedi Master Kenobi very difficult to beat on offense. I mean, you could use another Jedi Master Kenobi, of course, but none of the other GLs could really beat him in set 1. Set number 2 effectively gave the Jedi a good option with Riposte to beat Jedi Master Kenobi. But set 2 also, which was, these 2 are available at the beginning of Datacron, so they didn't make any changes to these. Set 2 was with 25% turn meter, Riposte, doing 100% more damage if your Jedi had 100% health and protection start of turn. So both of these on defense, plus the additional damage and health steal from the staff, they're very, very strong on defense broadly. Like there's no strategy in putting plus 25% turn meter. I personally don't think it was that bad. There's a lot of ways to go around it, but still, it's a great defensive choice. Um, if we start looking at set 3, you can see, you can see that they started changing the mechanics a little bit to be less stupid on defense. Anything from like Initiate is awesome. What a great character. It's extremely powerful. Almost nobody has her. I mean, you're going to Relic 7 your Initiate. You have to get the datacron too. But sort of useless on defense because no speed really. So any turn meter trained team can just run her over. And like the C alt or the C datacrons, they made him a bit more difficult, but not amazing and easy to outthink when you're facing on defense. Same with like Beskar Mandalorian and his birds. I mean, you can get around that pretty easily if you're smart as well. Like there's lots of options to outthink them when they're on defense. Doesn't mean they're bad on defense, but they're not quite as omnipresent in set 3 and I think in set 4 as they were in set 1 and 2. And they're in some ways they're giving some bonuses via the stats that are not competing as much with mods. I mean, Health Steal for sure was not on mods, but now with like dodge and special critical avoidance and special accuracy, and I mean it's just all dodge or hit chance, but none of those are really available on mods. So your mods are relatively then more valuable when the datacrons aren't providing much higher of the same stats you can get via mods, which I think is a generally good thing. Power level of set 4 definitely is going up a little bit. Like the Empire one, I think there's only 2 mechanics that are really powerful in set 4. The Empire cooldown reset or deployable cooling systems, and the bonus turns that they have for Dash Rendar and TIE Fighter Pilot. I think both of those bonus turn ones are incredibly powerful. Probably, I mean, I think Dash is too easy to outperform when he's on defense because he's mostly on defense. He's going to be slow with a ton of offense. Like you don't need any speed on him if you're using Datacron. But then just start with a fast character and target him first and game over. Like it's too easy to outplay. The TIE Fighter Pilot's a little more difficult because you can put TIE Fighter Pilot with a bunch of other Empire teams. Like you could put him even with Lord Vader. Because Lord Vader's level 9s, you don't really need, to be honest, you don't really need the level 9s for Lord Vader. So if you have the level 6 one where he resets cooldowns, and then you put TIE Fighter Pilot as or Darth Vader, but I think Darth Vader's ones they don't really stop the GL counters. Anyway, I think TIE Fighter Pilot is going to be surprisingly powerful, depending on what team he's in, but mostly because he shares all the Empire bonuses that they have. And that's just those. So talking about the level 6 cooling system a little bit, it's powerful because there's a lot of videos about Lord Vader, Darth Vader, and Tarkin. But Tarkin is never going to be on defense. It's like a great, cheap, easy counter to GLs right there. Lord Vader, that's going to be a real problem. He's sort of coming into his prime. And Darth Vader, again, it's just an offensive tool. So, I mean, I love these offensive tools. It sort of relates to the point I was making earlier. They're making datacrons much more useful for offense rather than defense because it's more fun to play offense for many people, not everybody, of course. Some people just like to have a great defense and watch their opponent get on the struggle bus as I start. Everybody has their own playstyle preference, but I think in general, people like to play the game rather than attacking 3 teams and then they can't do anything else and they're done with their JC. That's no fun for that person, I don't think. I think what many people are overlooking is the impact of these level 6 deployable cooling systems for Empire. And other teams like Iden, Inquisitors are going to be so powerful, my goodness. EP-led teams, Starkiller is going to be interesting a bit. Anyway, in general, I think the impact of datacrons on playstyle is shifting more people, or on engagement. In the earlier part of datacrons, shifted a good number of people, I would imagine, away from GAC. And I think that now they're trying to bring that engagement back by making them more effective on offense. Yeah, that's everything I said right here. Yeah, again. So the downside of datacrons for engagement is that there's a number of players that are at this, that were before datacrons introduced, they were at this roster level where they didn't have a lot of full Relic 3 or Relic 5 teams. So they couldn't make a use of a lot of the datacron abilities, even if they had datacrons from farming Conquest, you know? So I think this is a problem because all these players had to readjust their gearing priorities. And if you've been gearing characters the same way for, I don't know, years, this is a big change and very difficult to get adjusted to. So I think that is the biggest challenge. I don't think that CG is going to change that, though. It doesn't seem like they gave an indication of that. Mostly, it looks like they're changing the acquisition rate and the complexity in terms of how many are active at the same time. But I think that's very tough. That's probably the toughest part about datacrons, is those players who are sort of in the middle where they don't have many units or teams that can even use datacrons, and the players they're fighting have much more roster size GP and can use more datacrons. So like many of the datacrons are a whole bonus character. It's like a team with 6 characters in a way. So if you can't compete with that because of your roster's size and relic levels, that's tough to adjust to. So playstyles. How are datacrons impacting playstyles? Quite a bit, actually. But generally, for the players who are flexible and able to adjust, I think very positively, they're giving players who are competitive in GAC a huge advantage, broadly. So how did I evaluate this? Besides my opinion and watching a lot of fights of many different content creators and participating in discussions and blah, 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 blah. Opinion stuff, I did look at data. So actually, let's look at some of this data. This is one of the most interesting things I've seen recently. I did totally redo my playstyle evaluation too. I'll have new playstyles now. But let me show you this tool. So this is, make this bigger. Yeah, this is something that Brig, it's his Discord name, put together. It is a Google spreadsheet that you can play with yourself. Basically, it's available on the Grand Arena Science Discord in the publications channel. Basically what it does, you can populate the alley codes. I'll show you how I did it for the evaluation, but essentially what it does, it looks at the GP, the roster size of the players. It looks at their skill rating, and then it does a calculation between those to see their max rating. It looks at their skill rating, their max rating, and then it does a calculation, and it gives you what is intended to be this scale, this rating ratio over here. How well you are performing in skill rating compared to your GP. And he's done this for thousands and thousands and thousands of data points, so he has something to base it on. Like the average player at this GP has X skill rating. What skill rating do you have? That's sort of the question it's asking. There's more stuff though, like it looks at guilds and a bunch of other stats here, speed, blah, blah, blah. Awesome tool. Go check it out. Go to the Grand Arena Science Discord. It's in all publications. So I looked at the top 25 of Kyber 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is my Kyber 5 lookup to see how players in each of these divisions were doing. So this is just in the Kyber League, keep in mind, but how they were doing compared to their GP. And you can get an idea. Generally, if the number is higher, the player is sort of hitting up, like it's an aggressive lower GP player who's more focused on GAC, whether that's from using datacrons or just smart play or whatever, they're hitting up a bit. And some of them, GP-wise, you can see that the player just doesn't care so much, they drop down this far, or they're not a GAC-focused player and they just play for fun. Who knows? But it's interesting to look at it and to see the different, again, because I'm trying to analyze playstyles here. I'm trying to figure out which players are the competitive ones, which are ones at the top of Kyber 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, just being at the top of these divisions doesn't necessarily mean these are the most competitive players, because the most competitive players in Kyber are probably all trying to get up towards Kyber 1. So they could be in the middle of Kyber 3, for instance. So this is not a perfect evaluation, but it gave me a starting point because I could get all their ally codes and do the analysis of them. So this is Kyber 5, for instance, and it's actually quite interesting. Like there's a number of 5 million GP players in Kyber 5. You can see how high they're. These are the 5 million ones, the one with like 93. That's amazing. Anything over 90 is pretty good, by the way. It usually means you're a pretty good player if you have over 90. Because if you look at the top of Kyber 1, not all these players are on the top of Kyber 1, but all of these are content creators, basically. Some non-content creators, he put me in there, very nice. Some non-content creators, but in general, they're all popular content creators. So you can see, regardless of their GP, some of them are, 7 million GP. There's one from Inquisitor Vels, I think that's a Darth Loquidar character. One of his. But these guys are at well over 90%, most or half of them over 100%, doing amazingly well. And they're at all different ranges. So it's a very helpful tool to sort of baseline your performance. I think of it as not so much a way to evaluate GAC performance, but a way to evaluate how you've built your roster compared to what's going on in the meta. Anyway, so this is what I use to evaluate playstyles, and it's a very cool tool if you like numbers and spreadsheets and stuff like that, which I do. Okay, back to Pepito. So what are the playstyles that I found? I think there's 3. One of them is this full clear, try and get all one-shots. And this is really the primary, the top end of Kyber 1 especially. Maybe not in the top 100. Almost all of the top 25. Starts to slack off a little bit around top 30 or something, like 30 to 60 is another range, and then sort of like 60 to 100 plus is another range. The higher up you go, the more they're focused on offense, or this playstyle, the full clear of one-shots. Just because all of those players usually will find a way to do that no matter what team you play. Like these are the most flexible offensive players in the current meta with datacrons that give you so much flexibility, give you the potential for so much flexibility. Next playstyle, half of their strongest defensive units are on defense. Generally, this means GLs. This is something you start to see anything outside of the top 100, Kyber 1. I don't think this is half. This is mostly the players who are falling. Let's put it that way. Or players put this roster in, for 1 week or one season because they were busy or whatever the reasons are, and they'll fall a bit. Like you can still do fine, but you have to spend much less time. Put your strong defense, attack a little bit, and hope your opponent's worse than you, or has like a really crappy roster compared to you, or not crappy, but smaller roster compared to you. It's a terrible way to play against really effective offensive players because you won't have anything against their defense normally, or you won't be able to be very effective against their defense. But it's entertaining, even though a number of content creators have shifted to a more like, full clear playstyle. There's still ones that do this one, the stronger defense, because it's much more entertaining, I think, from a content creator perspective. You have a lot more fights, trickier fights. You can try out more things because usually your opponent will have a difficult time, for most opponents, but not all, more difficult time winning because they have to beat some difficult defensive teams. And thirdly are what I would call most of the smaller roster sizes, but in general, I would call them the most competitive players. They just know more, research, time, big brain, and have more time than you. Like they can research things, they can think about it, they can talk on Discord, they can for YouTube videos, they can test an arena, all sorts of stuff. And that's a third play style. I do think it's generally the smaller roster sizes, but it's not always. Some players are like that even at the super high end. Not as many, because I think most of the high end players, once you get in the top 100 of Kyber, unless you just want to be top 10 or something, if that's one of your goals, there's not really a incentive to get much higher. If you're in the top 100 and you get into the top 300, most players who are in the top 100 will find the 300 very boring and easy, which, if you have less time, then that's great. But if you're in the top 50, top 20, top 100, whatever, that's a fun place to be, but why do you care about being number one? Some players just really want to be number one. But for many other players, it's more of they like the competition of being in the high ranks, but incentive-wise, why go for number one, for instance? Like there's no special title or whatever. And for many of the very offensive rosters, players with smaller rosters, like you get to a certain stage where how much time do you really want to spend trying to win a match? Like if you're so overmatched, you have 4 GLs or something like that against a 6 GL player, and they have triple or quadruple their amount of level 9 datacrons, like you could beat them. And many times you see this, but that's a lot of time to spend. So flexibility of playstyles or playstyle variables that apply to all the playstyles. There's not really, I think, playstyles under development. I think these 3 cover the majority of the players that I've seen and the combats that I've seen. But there are some variables that apply to any sort of playstyle you have. Flexibility is most important, especially with datacrons, where you have to be able to adjust what your opponent places on defense. Even if you're one of the super great offensive players trying to get a full clear with one shots, you can make mistakes. You can miss a variable in a datacron. You can forget something on your side. That's normal. It happens. Like it happens to every player all the time. And so working around that is one of the most key things. So knowing how datacrons work, being able to adjust if one of your counters you're expecting to work every single time when that fails, how do you work your way around that? What sort of flexibility do you have? So that's about that. Let's move on to fleet. So what is Profundity busted fleet? Or busted made fleet easy now? Do you just get Profundity and don't care? Probably. I want to use a bit of an example here to what's the scenario for players at the top end with all the fleets? For players without all the fleets or with their fleets not at max relic level, I would say there's again, ignore what I got on the screen here for a moment. For players that have Profundity and Executor, but they're 4 or 5 stars, or they have Executor at 7 stars now, but their pilots are really 5 or 7 or something like that, and they get profundity at 4 stars. I would say those players are in the best position considering the other players are generally fighting. Once you have 7-star Radis and profundity, or excuse me, profundity and executor, that right now the gear levels of the pilots don't really matter. In mirrors they matter, but not in mirrors. The Rebel Y-Wing is probably the most important, to be honest, funnily enough. But that's very easy. I mean, there's no pilot, so it's going to be the same for everybody. Just get it to 7 stars. Besides that, once you have all of the fleets, I think the majority of players who don't like fleet RNG are going to do roughly the same. They'll keep Profundity and Executor for offense. Those will kill the opponent's Profundity and Executor, just one fights each, easy peasy. And then it's just left to the last fleet. Like, what do you put as your third fleet? Or what do you keep? Let's say, what do you keep as your third fleet? Do you keep Executrix or Chimera? Empire? Do you keep Empire or do you keep Negotiator? I think actually it is better to keep Empire on offense because it kills Negotiator when that's on defense very easily. Empire kills everything effectively. I mean, you can even use some cheese setups versus Profundity. I don't think there's going to be that many cheese setups. I mean, if you know your opponent is going to be placing a strong fleet defense, then maybe you'll try to do the same and use off-tier, not cheese, off-tier counters to break through their strong fleet defense. Like that's sort of like I put everything on defense in character zones and I try and use off-tier counters. You will see that a little bit. But I think for players who put their or who keep their strong fleets on offense because they just don't want to deal with RNG, they just want to beat the fleet zones, then the only real choice you have is do you keep Empire or Galactic Republic for offense. And I think Empire is the best choice. I went through the logic here. I mean, you have to have Relic Empire. And I think it's Executrix, which is a better fleet on offense. But anyway, so I went through all of you're giving up some potential banners a little bit by keeping Negotiate over keeping Executrix or Empire versus Negotiator. But if your opponent places the wrong setup, you give yourself some terrible RNG matchups if you have Negotiator on offense. Some other things you can do, maybe have Malevolence on offense because that'll kill Empire really easily. But then without your own Malevolence on defense, what else do you put on defense? Rebels? Or do you place your Empire? I'm curious to be proven wrong here and to be some other interesting setups, but I think you keep both of the meta fleets and Empire on offense. You'll be great. You'll one-shot everything. Some RNG terrible thing happens, you can two-shot it with your finalizer, or depending what your fifth fleet is that you keep, leftover rebels or something like that. Teams. So what's going on teams and characters? What's happening now? So Rey and Jedi Master Kenobi datacrons are gone. That's awesome. In threes, it doesn't make that big of a difference, to be honest. Rey is still going to be good in threes, like the Rey, Hermit Yoda, something will be good in threes. Jedi Master Kenobi, good in threes, but in general, in threes, people are keeping their GLs for offense. The majority of people are, at least the competitive ones usually. Just because if you don't have a GL to counter another GL, it's very difficult to beat GLs with non-GLs in 3v3. Malgus is amazing with his datacron, is fantastic. He can kill a ton of stuff with his datacron. He can solo full Sith Eternal teams, and actually we'll pause here for a moment. Initiate is also the most stupid datacron ever. I personally, I have the Initiate datacron, and I think it's awesome. Tons of fun. Even in fives, let's see where. Okay, right here. All right, so let's take a look at this. So this is Amalgus, as you saw. Amalgus solo versus a C team. All this footage is my footage. This fight is not played very well. I should have basic for a while. Killed assassin first. There's so many things I did wrong here. Basic raising your max health so you can deal more damage with third special. Yeah. So many things that I got wrong. But this is some of the things, like, nobody is really complaining about Initiate because most people don't have the Initiate Datacron or Initiate character. Most people don't complain about Malgus because he is meant to be, like, he has 3 Omicrons. Crazy. One of them is really useless in 3v3, but good in 5v5. And with the Datacron, he's awesome. But still, he gets killed easily by GLs. So for this upcoming set 4, people are, all the videos and everything are around set, or not set, they're around Darth Vader and Tarkin soloing GLs. Big deal. I mean, I think it's awesome. This is the off-tier counters that we've been enjoying for so long. This is going to be fantastic to use, especially one like Tarkin, where you're only going to use it on offense. It takes away Emperor Palpatine, it takes away Watt. Like, it's not a cheap team. If it kills GLs, great. I mean, I think it's awesome. You can shut it down to so many things. Anything that stops bonus turn meter. It could be Hux. Hux in First Order is an easy one. You can't do anything against JMK because you can't gain bonus turn meter against JMK. There's ways you can set it down. So any characters who gain bonus turns, like if you use Tarkin against the Dash or a TIE Fighter pilot with the bonus turn thing, yeah, you can't do anything. Sorry. So there's counters out there. People just like the videos and the big numbers generally, and it'll be fun to use. And the same is, it's just like one team. I think Lord Vader is actually going to be more annoying than anything else because you'll have a strong team with him, and there's no real way to cheese Lord Vader. Well, I don't think so. So that one I think we'll see the most people complaining about, which is cool. I mean, but Lord Vader's been strong for so long. I'm looking forward to the next GL to take over his top spot. So here, if you're looking at the video now, yeah, it's sort of difficult at the end because the shock can't be Darth Malgus is not immune to the shock, so he won't regain health. So you have to sort of beat Sith Eternal Emperor. So that's why it helps more to stack at the beginning. So here is, I did this also against, even Malgus is the most challenging bit here because he can steal 100% of your health. You do have 500% protection up, so it would take a couple of life drains, and at the speed which Initiate ramps her damage, like look at this, it's it's so stupid, but it's so awesome. 317k. And you don't need any other leads. Really, there's no point. Just build your Initiate with health mods and a crit chance triangle and some crit chance secondaries. Even if you don't have crit chance, you'll still gain so much TM. You can't put it against teams that have a lot of TM gain, or the Rebel set 2 that gives immunity. That doesn't work very well. Or maybe Gas if they have the 100% damage. Like, you can actually burst her down. You can see here, my Initiate's modded pretty well. You can see that Initiate gets down to like half of the bonus protection. So could be an issue, but such a fun fight. I think that's the last of it here. Yeah, and there we go. Win. There we go. Anyway, those DCs are fun. I think Dash and TIE Fighter Pilot, like I was mentioning earlier, are going to be awesome. What else is going on? Man, I don't understand. Why do people still place Darth Talon with Darth Malgus? She's not the Sith Empire. There's no way that Darth Malgus will be killed first. He loses his taunt pretty quickly. You always kill the sides, including Darth Talon. It gives him a little bit more speed. Whoopty friggin' who? You're not. There's no counter that's beating Darth Malgus. It's dependent on speed. I mean, maybe some gas counters, but gas is so terrible against Darth Malgus anyway. This is such a waste of Talon, man. I mean, I love when I see an opponent with it, but it's just stupid. Those players who do it are not stupid. The move itself is not well thought out. Talon goes with Treya 90% of the time, or there's other Sith you can put him in, like I think Savage, Oppress, and Talon, and somebody else. Very cool with this Omicron. One thing that a few people discovered last 5v5 season, a lot of people are like, oh, Raditz is tough to beat. Yes, he's tough, but Geos beat him very effectively. Not all Raditz comps, and you have to be careful of your Geo gear levels, but this is actually a great counter. Take a look at the GG stats for that, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when 5v5 comes back, especially when 5v5 comes back. Admiral Raditz in 5v5 will not profundity, will not have riposte, he'll not have immunity, will not have bonus turn meter. Still gonna be a strong team, but Geos are just gonna like demolish him. And if you think about it, using the some of the deflection datacrons could be very helpful on the Geos too. Why no fuss? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. People see some videos of Darth Vader soloing stuff, or Lord Vader, Tarkin, and blah, blah, blah. No one makes videos about the really cool and powerful characters, which I'm not sad about. It's fun to know about them and be able to use them with people not being prepared, but you should be prepared now. Inquisitors. Oh yeah, man. Inquisitors with this cooldown, the deployable cooling systems for Empire. Holy moly, they're going to be good. They inflict so many debuffs with Plague. And all of them have, not all, most have some AoE ability. It's going to be horrible. And especially with like the level 3, and depending on what you do, there's no real need to go level 9, but depending on what you do with the stats, with the dodge, and keep in mind the Inquisitor bonuses when they get evaded. I don't recall if that's just in, is that just in Territory Wars? No, I don't think so. Anyway, when they get evaded, they do damage as well. So anybody who has a Dodgicron, perfect for Inquisitors. Troopers with Grit. Grit itself you don't really care about, but having Grit serve as a buff where you get bonus turn meter at the start of the fight, that's a free 10% turn meter for your Inquisitors. So pretty cool. Yeah, Lord Vader, man, with a 6% alt one and the level 6 cooldown, that's terrible. Set 3, a sleeper, especially in 3s, is the All Revive part for Mother Talzin. Because you can split up the Night Sisters pretty effectively now. You can just send Mother Talzin and 2 others, and if they come back, keep in mind the leadership ability is still in effect after the leader dies. Not the start of the next combat if the fight's over, but if in the fight you lose Mother Talzin, you do a basic with one of your other 2, she will come back, she'll revive and come back and stay revived. Also, it's amazing. 44 minutes, my goodness, guys. I don't know why you listen to me so long. So here we are in the future. What's coming up in the future? So this was like teams and characters and stuff, datacrons. I want to look like future as a whole and some bigger picture items. So I do want to look at Jabba the Hutt. What is he going to do? So we know he has his Rancor special alt that you can use multiple times. Super cool, very nice. Where is he going to fit in the meta? What style will this kid have? So And where do we have to worry about getting him soon or farming datacrons for him before our next conquest? No, I don't think we do. If you look at the duration, I think he's going to be out in like 3 weeks approximately. If you look at the duration of the event, not the packs, but the event for Bush Leia Organa Blow. Look at the duration of the event. It's like, let's see, today I'm recording this on my Monday, my weird time of the part of the world. That's most people's Sunday evening, but it's like 17 days left or something like that. So yeah, the end of the month, I think, somewhere around either the exact end of the month or the beginning of next month is when we'll have Jabba. So no reason, no worry to farm certain datacrons for him. We don't even know what his kit is, but I think we can look at get an idea of how his style of his kit will function. Like we know that JMK, or we knew that JMK would do stuff with protection up, probably some granted moves, etc. Once we saw Kat's kit and her Xian skill. Let's try and do something similar with Jabba's kit. So let's look at each. What are the characters going to be? We know 3 of them are going to be on a 5-man team. Blow, Kerr, and Skifflando, and then Enforcer or Gam Guard. I'm guessing Enforcer, they just gave her a rework and new art. Gam Guard, they might do the same, but let's go with Enforcer for now. Seems likely. And with Mob Enforcer, even more they're leaning into the thermal detonators style. And we already know that thermal detonators are a big part of Jabba's kit. They told us that in Road Ahead. So what do each of these characters do? Specifically, what do they do that's unique for their kit? And what do they do that's sort of unique collected amongst the 3 of them? So we can get an idea what Jabba's team is supposed to counter, do well against, etc. So she has very high, not very high, but pretty high special damage for her basic and special. She can detonate thermal detonators. She's immune to fear. That's pretty huge. Immune to fear is basically saying that she has some advantage versus the Darth Malgus team in GAC. There's no GLs that give fear. No attacking out of turn from her opponents for the beginning of the fight. They lose some speed. She is immune to turn meter manipulation. She buffs offense and some other stats. Any light sides, let's say half of the team, light side smugglers are going to be immune to ability block and stun. Ability block and stun. That says ability block is JML, stun is JML, stun is SLK, ability block is Lord Vader's ultimate. Oh wow, what a surprise. Lord Vader has his datacron, and half of Jabba's team, at least half we know, are going to be immune to ability block. So his ult really does nothing. And you put on one of the datacrons that heal you every time a damage over time or a health-based percentage effect goes into play, and Lord Vader does nothing to this team. Interesting. Coincidence, huh? No, hardly. What does the big Wookiee do, the cool Wookiee? Reduces offense and crit damage for the entire fight. Resurrects after getting killed. That's obviously against JMK. Speeds up the team, or himself rather. He is not one of these smugglers, but in GAC he's immune to cooldown increase in ability block. Gosh, it seems like a theme, huh? How about Skifflando? So he gets also he's a light side smuggler. He would get the immune to ability block and stun from Blow. He sort of has like 3 stages of ramping and can give buffs out to other units as well. He gives bonus turns, speed up, and retribution. Many of the basics of the other Hutt cartel apply thermal detonators, giving Blow, Leia, Bush, and me, the Mob Enforcer, ways to inflict thermal detonators to give big nukes for the characters that either Skip Lando does a big nuke depending on the amount of debuffs thermal detonators, and Boost Leia does a big nuke depending on the amount of thermal detonators by detonating them. Different ways of doing damage. Like think of Skip Lando as more like direct damage, and Leia is for units. Basically, Skip Lando is going to kill the GLs because most GLs don't take damage from percentage-based effects. Skip Lando is going to kill the GL. Leia and Mob Enforcer is going to kill everybody else. That's sort of how I view it. So, based upon all the effects that we've seen and we know about, and the complexity of these, using the right abilities on the right targets, probably we can see that they're not going to be great on defense, or not amazing on defense. Like, they're not going to block any particular GLs very hard. I mean, I think mechanic-wise, probably C and Rey. Well, Rey without Ben Solo, and maybe JML. I think we'll have a hard time kit-wise. Maybe even SLK will have a hard time kit-wise to beat these teams, to beat Jabba's team. But still, they probably can. So I also think, though, that I think Jabba is going to be tied for the most powerful offensive GL. So he's going to be at JMK, maybe even a bit better than JMK on offense versus all the GLs. Except perhaps Rey and Ben Solo. I think it's going to be Jabba and Rey and Ben Solo as the top two GLs. JMK and Lord Vader is the second. Although while Lord Vader has datacron, probably right up there with Jabba. But just his datacron really doesn't do anything versus Jabba. I mean, because they're immune to stun and ability block. And with the datacron, smuggler datacron, you get immunity to damage over time, or effective immunity to damage over time. And they do bonus turns instead of turn meter gain. So, yeah, I don't think Jabba will have a problem with even datacron Lord Vader. So that's my opinion of Jabba and his kit and where he'll fit. Most importantly, where he'll fit in the meta. We'll see what happens. Very curious, see how it works out. So, besides Jabba, what else is impacting in the road ahead? Really, the only thing that impacts it is mods. And not just the mod, what they call it, calibration. Not with just mod calibration, but also with the changes they're making to mod acquisition, getting rid of the 3 and 4 dot mods, and making it easier for players to use their mods, slice their mods, etc., etc. That's awesome. So I think that's going to make it, for anybody who is competitive and plays this game seriously, having these additional tools from the mod QOL improvements coming are going to be a big impact in GAC. It's not going to dramatically, like, the best players are doing this already with the existing tools, so just give them a bigger edge up and make those players who are trying to climb of middle roster sizes another advantage. Besides that, not really. The new territory battle, while I think it's awesome from a game perspective, and I'm very excited for it, I'm moderately excited for it. I like something new, but the PvE game modes don't interest me super much. Maybe it'll make Inquisitors better with Riva. If it introduces a new power level like 7 dot mods or Relic 10 or something, then that's going to be interesting for GAC, but we don't know anything about that yet. So I think this is going to be a really interesting season. Datacrons are interesting. I now have a green screen behind me, so you don't see my wall. Good luck with the GAC. Check out the counter Discord bot if that's your thing. We are having some UI changes coming soon to the web tool, the web app. But the Discord bot's another option for you too. And good luck in this coming GAC. Cheers!